America horror and act of bravery. The latest on the Bondi Beach massacre is next. This is Now You Know. I'm Rob Snow.
Deeper than the headlines.
The answers you need to know.
This is Now You Know with Rob Snow on News Radio.
The death toll from the Bondi Beach massacre stands at 15, 16 if you include one of the gunmen. The perpetrators of one of the worst mass shootings in Australian history are a father and son. They targeted Jews who had gathered for a Hanukkah celebration. Anthony Albanese is the Prime Minister of Australia.
And the fact that this was a venue for this act of evil that was clearly calculated by these perpetrators is just an outrage and a shock to the community. One of the things that is coming through, though, is that the community want to be able to express their support and solidarity. And I would urge and join with others who have urged Australians across the country to light a candle, put it in their front window tonight at 6:47 p.m. to show that light will indeed defeat darkness, part of what Hanukkah celebrates, of course.
The dead include a 10-year-old girl, a rabbi, and a Holocaust survivor. Dozens of others were injured, some critically. Much like Canada, there's been a dramatic increase in antisemitism in Australia since the October 7th Hamas attack on Israel. Synagogues and cars have been set on fire. Jewish homes and businesses have been vandalized. Jews have been attacked in the streets. Albanese was asked by a journalist if his government has taken the rise in anti-Semitism seriously.
As you were just saying, anti-Semitism leads to terrorism and violence targeting the innocent. Your government has come under criticism in claiming that it has effectively responded to the rise of anti-Semitism in Australia since October 7, 2023. In September, your government recognised a Palestinian state. Your ministers have attacked the Israeli government. Senior ministers refused to visit the sites of the October 7 massacres. And you created a special Islamophobia envoy alongside an anti-Semitism envoy. Have you taken the threat of anti-Semitism seriously? And can you guarantee the safety of Jewish Australians?
Yes, we have taken it seriously. And we've continued to act. We've continued to work with Jewish community leaders. We've continued to take all the advice from the security agencies to put in place special measures, and we'll continue to do so.
For the Prime Minister of Israel, though, Benjamin Netanyahu, the Australian government's decision to recognize a state of Palestine contributed to this mass shooting of Jews.
Instead, Prime Minister, you replaced weakness with weakness and appeasement with more appeasement. Your government did nothing to stop the spread of anti-Semitism in Australia. You did nothing to curb the cancer cells that were growing inside your country. You took no action. You let the disease spread. And the result is the horrific attacks on Jews we saw today.
Ahmed al-Ahmed is being hailed a hero. He's the Muslim owner of a fruit stand who disarmed one of the gunmen. He's recovering from surgery after being shot twice in the arm. This is his cousin.
Absolutely, he's a hero. Absolutely. Because maybe he can lose his life to save the other people. I hope everyone in Australia wish everything is good for Ahmed to get back to his family.
In Ottawa, Prime Minister Mark Carney attended a menorah lighting ceremony.
And what should be a celebration, unfortunately, which is also a commemoration. But a celebration and a commemoration of the resilience of the Jewish people. The government will always stand with you. It's not enough. It is not enough to protect the Jewish community. It is not enough for Jewish Canadians to live without fear. Canada is not Canada unless all members of the Jewish community can fully participate in all aspects of Canadian life.
The gunmen are a 50-year-old and his 24-year-old son. The father was shot and killed by police. The son is in hospital. The father had been living in Australia since 1998. He first went there on a student visa. The son previously on the radar of Australian authorities back in 2019. I'm Rob Snow. This is Now You Know. This is News Radio.
No question goes unasked or unanswered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow returns on News Radio.
Alberta Premier Danielle Smith had an eventful 2025. She toured the province with what was called the Alberta Next panel. She had to deal with a province-wide teachers' strike, and she signed a wide-ranging memorandum of understanding with Prime Minister Carney on energy policy. So to talk about the year in Alberta, I am very pleased to welcome back Premier Danielle Smith. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, my pleasure. Nice to talk to you, Rob.
Well, I want to begin with the Alberta Next panel because you toured all across the province for many weeks this year, and you heard from thousands of residents of your province on Alberta's relationship with Canada. Premier, what consensus do you think was reached on some of the issues, whether it's an Alberta pension plan or a provincial police force or immigration and equalization? What did you take away from that?
I think the consensus was that we should draw some inspiration from Quebec. Now that we're becoming a larger province in population, a more powerful province in terms of our economy, it's time to start taking on more of the same kind of responsibilities that we've seen in other larger jurisdictions. And so I think we'll be getting the results of the recommendations coming out very shortly. But one of the biggest recommendations that came out of it, and almost a widespread consensus, was around taking more control over immigration, the way Quebec does. They choose their newcomers based on the ability to speak French and fit into the culture. We think Albertans would like us to return to a more economic focus on migration, because the number of newcomers that have come to our provinces has put a lot of strain on our public resources, a lot of strain on our housing, a lot of strain on the job market. And I think that was one of the things that we heard across the board, that having a little bit more control over that would make some sense now.
Okay. Do you feel as though you've reached any kind of consensus on things like a pension plan or a provincial police force? Quebec has a pension plan. Quebec has its own police force as well.
Not on a couple of things. I mean, collecting our own income tax and the pension plan, those were very mixed results. So I'll be interested to see what the panel recommendations are. When it comes to the police force, I mean, 80% of our citizens are already policed by a municipal level of force. It really is just in rural Alberta. And what we found in rural Alberta is grave frustration about the lack of response time. One of the common things that emerged is when people dial 911, they don't care who shows up. They just want someone to show up. And so I think that you'll probably see that there's a lot of enthusiasm for us to provide new policing options, whether it's our provincial sheriffs or whether it's additional regional and municipal police forces to fill that gap. And the question will be, do we let the RCMP contract end up riding it out until 2032? Do we end it earlier, or do we extend it? That's another decision that we're going to have to put to Albertans.
I mean, there are certainly people in Alberta who don't feel as though Confederation is working for them, and they do think that Alberta would be better off on its own. You have always said you want Alberta to remain part of a united Canada. For our listeners in Ontario, for our listeners in Atlantic Canada who may be looking at this and they're wondering, why do these people want to separate from Canada? Help us understand that a little bit more, what you think is at play there, Premier.
Well, I would say that the separatist sentiment has only ever been around 10 or 15% as a consistent level that I have seen in the times I've been watching politics, but it flares up from time to time. And it's flared up to as high as 40% with the result of the last federal election. And I think that's just a measure of the frustration of the lost decade that we have in Alberta. We had major projects that kept getting either canceled or by the federal government, or canceled by the proponent because they saw no pathway to getting them built, whether it was Keystone XL or Energy East or the Northern Gateway or a Tex Frontier mine, or on and on. We calculate there may have been as much as half a $500 billion worth of investment that ended up getting kiboshed in the last 10 years. And that matters because if you don't have that investment, you don't have the jobs that go along with it. You don't have the tax revenues that go along with it to pay for social programs. And so that's where the frustration comes from. And so when it looked like we were going to see a continuation of the same bad 10 years for the next 10 years, I think that's when it ended up bubbling over. I'm pleased to say that the Prime Minister has recognized the threat and has been willing to work with us. So the first step is of this new relationship was the Memorandum of Understanding that we signed. And we are already beginning to see the outcome of that. The two of the worst laws that we had were an emissions cap on our oil and gas production, as well as the clean electricity regs, which would have also put a cap on our ability to develop our power grid. Both of those are now gone, and we've already seen businesses talk about expanding production, building a new gas-fired electricity generation, building new AI data centers, and that's only been 2 weeks. So I imagine that over the coming months, as we start working towards a bitumen pipeline going to new Asian markets, I think that people will get their confidence restored. But it is now a matter of show me, not tell me, and that's what I'm going to keep on working to do.
Okay, let's move to public education because you did legislate an end to a teacher strike and used the notwithstanding clause to do it. Why did you do that?
Well, anytime you have a strike, you have to make a judgment of the rights of others being impacted. I know the federal government has had to do that when it's been a port strike or a rail strike or an airline strike or even a postal strike. And so we saw that the strike went on for 3.5 weeks and the right of kids to get an education was being impacted. We also have a decentralized education model. And we knew that if we didn't order them back using the notwithstanding clause, we could have ended up with 61 local strikes as well. And it wouldn't have satisfied what we needed to do, which is to get the kids back in school. So it's not the optimal way of solving labor disputes. We far prefer for a negotiated settlement, but we were just getting further and further apart, and the kids were getting harmed, and so we had to make a decision to get everybody back in the classroom.
Your critics don't like your repeated use of the notwithstanding clause. How do you defend that?
I would say whenever kids are being impacted, that's when, it's extraordinary to use the notwithstanding clause, but we've had some extraordinary policies over the last number of years. It was extraordinary to have a province-wide strike impacting 750,000 kids. We had to put an end to that. We've also seen sort of an extraordinary turn when it comes to medicalizing issues of gender identity, and there really just isn't good science behind it. So we want to make sure that we're preserving the rights of kids to make decisions about their own fertility when they're old enough to understand it. We want to make sure parents are not interfered with so that they know what's going on with their kids, and we want to make sure that girls and women have the ability to compete in sports with against other girls and women, and not those athletes who are born male. And so those are all the considerations that we had. Was we felt like we could have challenged those in court. The court struck down one of those laws, and we had to make a judgment of whether having these laws not on the books for years and the impact it would have on the kids in the meantime, whether or not that was something that we could let the court process play out. And we made a determination to take the actions that we did. I think it's going to, with the passage of time, we're seeing New Zealand is taking the same approach, the UK, Sweden, Norway, Finland, the United States. Everybody's very concerned about the fact that we have very, very little medical evidence that this is the right pathway to treat kids who have gender dysphoria. And so we want to take a position on the side of caution.
The federal government wants an opinion from the Supreme Court and wants limits on the use of the notwithstanding clause. What do you think of that?
It would upend the consensus that we had in coming together with repatriating our Constitution and bringing through the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. Our premier, who was at the table at the time, Peter Lougheed, he was very strong, along with, I think, Alan Blakeney in Saskatchewan, in saying that we have to maintain parliamentary supremacy. That is part of our system, that the courts and the parliaments and legislatures have a dialogue, but it is the elected people who create the law, pass the laws, repeal the laws. The judges interpret the laws, Increasingly, they've gotten into the area of trying to make the laws, and that is when legislatures say, sorry, you're kind of out of your lane. That's our lane, and we're able to use the notwithstanding clause to get it back. So I look at this as a dialogue with the courts, and sometimes a single judge or a panel of judges, they don't always get it right. And so that's why we have to make sure that the power remains in the hands of elected people.
Be back with more of my conversation with the Alberta Premier, Danielle Smith, coming up next here on Now You Know on News Radio.
Critical thinking is not dead.
Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Returns on News Radio.
We're here with Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. One of the highlights of Canadian politics this year was the signing of the MOU between your government and the Liberal government in Ottawa. But then the federal Liberals voted against a federal Conservative motion on the floor of the House of Commons that borrowed much of the language from the MOU. How do you interpret that?
Well, the way I interpret it is I wish that the MOU in its entirety had been put forward, because I would have thought that if Elizabeth May was cherry picking some of the items in the MOU that she liked, she would have chosen very different clauses than the Conservatives. Okay. And that was the whole point, is that it was a negotiated agreement. It was a grand bargain. It was us putting on the table the things we thought were important to develop our economy, and the Prime Minister also having some priorities that he wanted to achieve with carbon pricing and with the Pathways project. So we were looking to try to get a win-win out of it. What I took from Pierre Poilievre's motion is that he doesn't feel that we should have to jump through hoops to develop our resources. He would have repealed the 9 laws out of hand, and probably we'd be well on our way to planning a pipeline. But unfortunately, he didn't win a majority government in the last election, and we have to negotiate with the one that did. And that was, I think, the best that we could do to get to an agreement that both parties felt was going to be beneficial for not only Alberta, but for the country.
How much has this reset the relationship between the two governments, Alberta and Ottawa?
I would say it's a very positive first step. That I've already noticed a difference in the way Prime Minister Mark Carney conducts himself in the office compared to his predecessor. He's far more engaged, not only with the Council of the Federation as a whole, but with each of the premiers individually. You can see with the major projects office that he's trying to identify the projects that are a priority to each premier. And I've appreciated that. He's very accessible. And I think that maybe because he's had a chance to work with Conservative prime ministers before, maybe as well because he's spent some time in Europe, that he understands what a decentralized federation is and how it should operate. And so I'm encouraged that he was willing to so quickly work with us to try to get to a common understanding of how we go forward. There's going to be lots of areas where we're going to continue to disagree, but I hope that as a country we can all agree that investing in projects that generate wealth so that we can all have sustainable budgets and that we can all benefit from it, I hope that is no longer controversial. He made a joke one time about when he was asked about pipelines, saying that, pipelines boring. Well, I agree with him. I want pipelines to be boring. I don't want any controversy around pipelines. I want everyone from every political party to realize that it's just one way to develop our immense resource wealth, and we should be proud of it, and we should find a way to minimize the impact on the environment and ensure that there's First Nations ownership, but they should get built. And I hope we can enter a new era where that happens.
It's part of my conversation with the Alberta Premier Danielle Smith. For the entire interview, you can go to calgary.citynews.ca. I'm Rob Snow. This is News Radio. It's our Monday Newsday panel, and our focus today is healthcare. Rosalie Wynoch is Associate Director of Research of Health Policy at the C.D. Howe Institute. Thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And Margot Burnell is President, Canadian Health Association. Thanks for joining us as well.
Pleasure to represent the Canadian Medical Association.
Canadian Medical Association. Thank you, Margot Burnell. And let's start with you. What's the good news about healthcare? Healthcare only seems to make the news when something is going wrong with the healthcare system. What's going right with Canada's healthcare system, Margot Burnell?
So I think what's going right is the recent report of Our Care, which demonstrated that more Canadians now have a family doctor or are attached to a primary care team. So that number has improved from 6.5 million that were unattached now to 5.9 million, and 77% were previously attached, and that has now increased to 81%. So more Canadians have access to primary health care.
Okay. How did that happen?
That happened by looking at multiple strategies with respect to training more doctors, recruiting more doctors, retaining more doctors. It happened by developing and expanding team-based care across the country, which is where physicians practice with their colleagues, nurse practitioners, and allied health, so that when a patient presents with a given issue, it can be determined who is the best professional to see them for that issue.
Okay. Rosalie Wynoch from the C.D. Howe Institute, in your opinion, what's going right in healthcare these days? What are we getting right?
Well, I'd echo Margot in that having hundreds of thousands of people who didn't have a family doctor now have access to primary care is a solid win. Maybe unfortunately we have high population growth that might be hiding some of that success in the aggregate numbers. But I'd also point out that the East Coast had some of the largest gaps and has implemented a virtual care solution to fill those gaps. It might not be comprehensive in-person care, but it's at least an access channel. And so they went from the lower end of access to actually, making probably some of the most progress. And one other thing I wanted to point out that most people probably just aren't aware of is that Canada is a world leader in outpatient and day surgeries. It has shorter lengths of stay in hospitals, and it has relatively fewer admissions. So compared to other countries, Canada actually does a pretty good job of keeping people out of hospitals and getting them out of the hospital quickly when they do need to be there. And as you said, we don't normally celebrate our wins. We focus on what isn't working, but that's a highlight to me where Canada is, in fact, a world leader.
Okay. Let's talk about a few things that have been in the news even recently. Rosalie Wynoch, what do you think of this plan from the Alberta government to allow doctors, mainly surgeons, to work in the public system and the private system at the same time? And how does that compare to what's happening elsewhere in Canada?
Well, it's certainly unique in Canada. It's the only province that would allow doctors to be in the public and private system at the same time. But in all provinces except Ontario, physicians can practice privately. They just can't do dual practice like Alberta is going to try out. And I would say I'm probably less skeptical about Alberta's potential changes than many. I think there's a need for transparency for patients and the government so that as these changes go forward, they can be closely monitored and adjusted. But I think overall, there's the potential that this could attract more physicians to Alberta. It could take some patients off of the public wait list. And so the net impact will really depend on whether this means that some physicians decide to work more hours, how many physicians decide to do private practice versus public, and what the mix is. So this is really it has potential. There are dual practice systems that work, but it will need to be closely monitored. And so I'm looking forward to seeing what happens. And my hope is that they do it in a way where we actually do get the benefits of a shrinking wait list and, an increase in the amount of physicians that are providing care in the province. And so I'm, shall we say, cautiously optimistic, but obviously there are those sort of Canadian concerns about what does this do to equity and access and all of those things. But I'm of the opinion only time will tell, and we should keep an open mind and wait and see.
What do you think about what I would call, I guess, this Alberta model, Margot Burnell?
I'm not quite as optimistic, but appreciate the discussion. So I think that the concern is that this will decrease access to care for the majority of individuals within the system, that those that may choose to access the private system will be those individuals that have the monetary ability, have low complexity of care needs, and those who do not have the financial ability, have higher comorbidities, high complexity of needs, will wait longer in the public system. The CMA did a survey several years ago, and Canadians resoundingly said that they supported and valued the public health system, and that money really should not be a barrier to health and accessing. So as my colleague said, this is the only province that has allowed sort of the three lanes, public, private, or dual. It will certainly be important to collect the data, to be transparent, and to be accountable to the citizens of Alberta. Physicians are reporting that they're tired. They're reporting that they're burnt out. So it will be important to track what hours they're working and where they're working, because right now many are looking at leaving the practice or profession, or are cutting back their hours. So looking at scaling those up, it will be interesting to see if that truly transpires.
Okay, we'll be right back. Many more questions for our panelists today. Rosalie Wynoch from the C.D. Howe Institute, and from the Canadian Medical Association, Margot Burnell, on our Newsday panel as we focus on healthcare. This is News Radio.
Now you know with Rob Snow continues on News Radio.
We're talking about healthcare and Canada's healthcare system today. It's our Monday Newsday panel. Rosalie Wynoch is Associate Director of Research of Health Policy, C.D. Howe Institute. And the President of the Canadian Medical Association, Margot Burnell, is with us here today as well. I call it membership medicine. And it's increasingly on the rise. People are willing to pay thousands of dollars in what I would call annual membership fees for more timely access to healthcare. What do you think about this trend in healthcare? Rosalie Wynoch, what do you think?
Well, I think that it's it's interesting from an economist point of view, and that's my background, because the public healthcare system, if it had the access that everyone wants, is free. So if people are willing to pay hundreds or thousands of dollars out of their own pocket for access, then that to me is a symptom that the public system is not adequately meeting the needs of the population. But I do think that having an access channel, whether it's sort of a pay-per-use or a membership-based thing, can have lots of benefits. Again, just because if you can get access to healthcare, then you're less likely to go to the hospital or visit an emergency room. But again, it does raise those potential equity concerns,
Sure.
where only those that can afford to have this access are getting it. But to me, it is filling a gap that the public system is supposed to fill, or it's in a category where the membership is associated with a whole bunch of other services that might not be publicly covered. So things that are, health and wellness benefits, or essentially just over and above what we think of traditionally as healthcare. But in the cases where it's similar, to me, the very fact that it exists and people are willing to pay for it shows the gap in the public system. Because as a business, it's really hard to compete when you're, the product of the government is free. So really,
it's very interesting. I mean, clearly there's a demand for it. Clearly there's a demand for it. I'm sorry, Rosalie. Margot, clearly there's a demand for it. They opened up one of these places in Ottawa, and it was thousands of dollars for the year, and thousands of people signed up. So there's clearly demand for it. But what do you think of the rise in its popularity, Margot Burnell?
So I think this does reflect a gap in access, and so I would say that we need to look at other strategies to increase access across our system so that it's not money that's buying one's health or one's access. So we need to train more physicians. We need to train more allied health professionals. We need to retain those people that we've trained. We need to recruit more physicians, nurse practitioners, allied health professionals. And we need to make their life easier with decreasing administrative burden and focusing on wellness and safety within the workforce and workplace.
Okay. You know, we started our conversation today, what's going right in healthcare, and you both mentioned we're addressing the shortage of family doctors in Canada, but it's still millions of Canadians without a family doctor. What is the figure? 6.5 million? Something like that? Without a family doctor? So what more could be done, Margot Burnell, on that front?
So I think it's a multi-pronged approach. One is to train more doctors. So we've seen a couple new medical schools open this past year, and certainly with a focus on training family physicians. We need to retain them, and so we need to make sure, as I indicated, that their work environment is culturally safe, psychologically safe, and they're supported. We need to recruit more physicians, and there's been a focus most recently with the immigration department having strategies and reducing barriers for internationally medically trained graduates. We need to decrease that administrative burden. Family docs are spending a day of their week filling out paperwork and doing those forms that are necessary for patients to access services or access care. And we need to integrate artificial intelligence with its tools across the physician workforce. And so it's a tool in their toolkit. And we need to ensure that there's seamless gathering and reporting of the patient's journey with respect to the information that's available to the patient and to their care team.
Okay. What are some strategies, do you think, Rosalie, to address the ongoing shortage of family doctors in Canada?
Well, I think that it's certainly a political priority, and there are government actions happening across the country. I would say in Ontario, there's been a historical government investment in primary care, and that's related to Jane Philpott's initiatives and the Our Care survey that Margot mentioned. Bill 2 in Quebec is a controversial bill at the moment, but it is the Quebec government's attempt to address some of the primary care access gaps. And on the East Coast, we've got virtual solutions to form a stopgap for access, as well as the recent federal immigration policy changes. So it's certainly, the government is certainly aware that this access gap exists, and there are a number of initiatives to address it. But one thing that I think we need to work into this conversation in a meaningful way is that primary care isn't necessarily a one-on-one relationship with a family doctor. I think we need to think about how to implement team-based care solutions in a way that really integrates those nurse practitioners and nurses in primary care, because we simply can't train our way out of this shortage. We obviously, all the initiatives to increase the number of family doctors are good, but we simply can't train or recruit enough to actually fully address this gap. And so we need to think about how to expand the definition of primary care and also who people might have that relationship with, so that, when you need to see the doctor, you can get that access, but a lot of things you don't need to, and you could perhaps see a nurse instead. And so if we could figure out more efficient ways to implement team-based care, I think we could do a lot with the existing providers that we have.
Okay, we'll be right back on our healthcare discussion today. This is News Radio.
There is no question Rob won't get answered.
Now You Know with Rob Snow continues
on News Radio.
We're focusing on healthcare today on our Newsday panel with Rosalie Wynoch from the C.D. Howe Institute and from the Canadian Medical Association, Margot Burnell. We just have about 3 minutes left here. Foreign credentials, we hear a lot about that for healthcare workers and the need to speed up the recognition of foreign credentials. How could that improve the situation and what needs to be kept in mind? Margot Burnell. Margot? Have we lost Margot? No, maybe she's on mute.
I'm here.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah, did you hear my question? Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
I did. I think there is a lot of work being done on this front. The Medical Council of Canada is working with the federal medical regulators across the provinces. Licensing is under the authority of the provincial colleges of physicians and surgeons. And therefore, individuals who have a job offer, first of all, need to immigrate to the country. The recent announcements by Minister Diab will allow them to obtain a work permit and permanent residency more quickly. And then at the college level, they will have their credentials, their training assessed to see what type of license they qualify for, and whether that's a full license or whether they need supervision, whether their skills need to be assessed, or whether they need upscaling of their skills. So the provincial colleges are working very diligently to try to ensure that there is a standardized template of those universities that have been accredited, and to identify who can practice within their province and then allow them to practice in other provinces if they meet certain criteria. So this is critically important, and we'll take those individuals that have training and give them the ability to practice in the Canadian health system.
Okay. We only have about a minute, Rosalie Wynoch. How important is this foreign credentials situation?
I think it's incredibly important. Like I said, I don't think we can train our way out of a doctor shortage, but if we can speed up the time or make it easier for foreign trained physicians to practice in Canada, then we become that much more attractive as a place that they might want to move to. And so really, the faster we can get them treating patients, the faster they can help us address that wait list. And immigration itself is a driving factor in our population growth and our current access challenges. So why can't immigration also be the solution if we just have more health professionals? And the faster we can do it, the better.
Thanks to the both of you for the discussion today. I greatly appreciate your time and insight. This is News Radio. Welcome to Talkback. It's 2 hours of debate and discussion on the big issues of the day. We're going to be open line, open topic all this week on Talkback. We'll have lots of topics each day. So if there's something you would like to bring up, a conversation you would like to start about something that's important to you, by all means, feel free to give us a call and raise it here. Our call-in line is 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. And if you're a first-time caller, just mention that to us and we'll make your call a priority. Everything that I have for topics today is all related to the news of the day, the rise in anti-Semitism in this country. Given the terrible attack that happened this weekend in Australia, Jews being gunned down for no other reason than they're Jews going to a Hanukkah event. And I have seen it expressed in the last 24 hours. Something like that could happen here in Canada. And we shouldn't think otherwise, that it couldn't happen in Canada, because it could happen in Canada. That's been expressed over and over and over again in the last 24 hours. And think about some of the things that have been in the news in the last few years. A Jewish all-girls school in Toronto shot at 3 times. 3 times. In Vancouver, a man tried to burn down a synagogue just as evening prayers were ending. A synagogue in Montreal has been firebombed twice. Bomb threats have been made against Jewish institutions across the country. Last July, the RCMP arrested a father and son in connection with an ISIS-inspired plot of wanting to murder Jews in the Greater Toronto area. And just about a week ago in Toronto, some Jewish people were leaving an event in downtown Toronto, and they were yelled at by a man carrying a flag of Palestine who was using a bullhorn and was telling them to go back to the slums of Europe. Listen to this.
Zionists, don't be worshiping. Don't worshiping Zionists. Go back to the slums of Europe where you came from. Yes, yes, yeah. From Israel. You go back to the slums of Europe. Yeah, go back to the slums of Europe. Nobody likes you. You Zionists, criminals, world criminals, land thieves. Never worshiping.
Just open hate on the streets of one of Canada's biggest cities. Every weekend for more than 2 years, pro-Palestinian protesters have marched through residential neighborhoods in the Bathurst Street area of Toronto. And the only reason they are there is to harass and intimidate Jews. There are no government buildings there. There are no government officials there. These are residential neighborhoods. And the police are there, and they simply allow it to happen. They do nothing. And I mean, that's just a small sample of what Jewish Canadians have had to endure over the last 2+ years. So let me ask you today, and if you want to join the conversation on this, please let's have a respectful conversation about this. The fact is that Jews make up less than 1% of the Canadian population, but 20% of all the hate crimes reported to police are targeting Jews in this country. Do you think the situation in Canada is any different than the situation in Australia? Do you think what happened in Australia could happen here? And do you think the government and the police take it seriously enough? Or should they be doing more to prevent acts of anti-Semitism in Canada? That's one topic. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Another topic we can explore today is safe spaces to use illegal drugs. Supervised drug consumption sites. The old term used to be safe injection sites, but now people are doing more than just injecting the drugs. They're inhaling the drugs. So this term is more commonly used now, supervised drug consumption sites. In Calgary, there was only one of these places, and the provincial government is going to close it down. That was first reported by the Calgary Herald. In its place, the Danielle Smith government will move to something called treatment services on demand. In Ontario, 9 of these places have been slated for closure. Some of them have closed already. Some of them soon will. And the Doug Ford government in Ontario says these facilities will be replaced by what are known as heart hubs, or homeless and addiction recovery hubs. In Nova Scotia, they've never had these places. There are no federally approved supervised drug consumption sites in Halifax or anywhere else in Nova Scotia for that matter. The Regional Council of Halifax has debated opening one in the past, but nothing ever came of it. No application was ever submitted to the federal health authorities. In some parts of the country, these places, supervised drug consumption sites, they used to be quite common. In Ottawa, a city I lived in for more than 30 years, we started out with one, and now there are 4 or 5 of them operating in the city. And when I've interviewed people who work in them, I've been told they're all busy, and they could really, if they needed to, open more of them because there's such a demand for the service. But they're falling out of favor now with political leaders. There are none in Nova Scotia. Many of them are being forced to close across Ontario. And in Alberta, the Smith government is going to close down the only one in Calgary. The people who work on the front lines of addiction in these places say closing them will not solve anything. It's only going to make a bad situation worse. Premiers like Danielle Smith and Doug Ford are on the record saying they don't believe in this approach called harm reduction. And they are vowing, promising, swearing that they'll provide more funding for a different approach that is more centered on treatment and rehabilitation. What's the better idea? Should we continue in this country to have supervised drug consumption sites, or should those facilities be closed? And the money spent on drug treatment programs, more rehab programs, residential treatment programs. Have your say on that one. 1-833-668-2577. Open line, open topic today on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
There's a lot happening in the news that we can talk about today. And something else that's in the news, food prices. Goodness me, we could talk about the price of food today. Food prices in the news up again, according to the latest inflation report that came out this morning from Statistics Canada, the November numbers. Prices for food purchased from stores up 4.7% year over year. Prices for fresh fruit up 4.7%. Beef prices up more than 17%. Beef prices up 17% year over year. Goodness me. Coffee prices up more than 27%. And on a month-over-month basis, grocery prices up 1.9%. The largest month-over-month increase since January of 2023. So the largest increase in almost 3 years for food prices, because it's almost January 2026 now. I'd be curious. I mean, what are you eating these days? What are you shopping for these days that maybe you didn't used to eat or shop for? Because it's a good way to save money at the grocery store. If you allowed us to, root through your kitchen cupboards or look into your refrigerator, what would be in there that didn't used to be in there? Either because it's inexpensive or versatile or it lasts a long time. I mean, what's in your kitchen that didn't used to be in your kitchen, but it's in there now because of the ongoing issues with the rising cost of food. Again, biggest increase in food prices in almost 3 years. 1-833-668-2577. 1-833-668-2577. Linda is up first today on Talkback. Linda's in Calgary. Hi, Linda.
Hi, how are you?
Yeah, I'm very good, Linda. Thank you for calling. What do you want to talk about?
I want to make a couple comments with regard to the safe injection site.
Yes.
First of all, I live in the Beltline of Calgary in a beautiful little area. And a number of years ago, our condo and a number of other buildings around us changed the policing in our area. And it was completely clean until Mayor Nenshi and our councillor brought in the safe injection site without consultation with community at all. Now, the thing that you need to understand about that site is that there are no other facilities within a mile and a half that can help these people. So our community quickly became littered with needles and, we spent $120,000 on security. So we're happy that they're closing it down. And in saying that, I really believe that these kinds of places need to be coupled with other services for these people. So I'm just going to put a plug in for the Calgary Dream Center. This is a center focusing on addiction, and there are a number of dream centers around North America. It has an unprecedented 95% success rate for people going through that center. It's a faith-based center, and it is unheard of that these types of programs have a 95% success rate. In fact, I have an employee who went through it, and he's one of the best guys I have.
Wow, that's incredible. When this site opened, what happened in your neighborhood?
Well, I'll tell you what it did happen is a number of drug dealers from across Canada infiltrated our beautiful little community. and it just increased the exchange, payment of drugs, you name it. It became a very unsafe area where we had spent a couple of years cleaning it up. So we're glad that it's being taken away. And I have to reiterate again, the people came from wherever they come from, but there was no other services for them. So they're in the park, their needles are all over, there's little kids coming from daycares. It was a real nightmare.
Okay, Linda, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's one of our topics out there today. The kind of move away from this sort of method of helping, I suppose, people who are dealing with drug addiction. The supervised drug consumption site, almost a dozen of them are going to close, if they've not closed already, in Ontario because of a change in the rules and regulations in Ontario brought in by the Ford government. And as I said, there's only one of them in Calgary, and the Smith government, Conservative government, is going to close that down as well. None in Nova Scotia. They never opened one, which is not for lack of a lobbying effort. There are people who believe in it and would like to think that one should open, say, in the city of Halifax. But, what if one did? 1-833-668-2577. One of many topics out there. Open line, open topic today on Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yeah, open line, open topic all this week on Talkback. The rise of anti-Semitism in Canada. We have been talking about that. Provincial governments moving to close down supervised drug consumption sites. Food prices up again, most in 3 years, according to the inflation report out today. Jay is in Calgary. Let's go to Jay. Hi, Jay.
Hi, how you doing?
Yeah, very good, Jay. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for doing this because this is my first time calling. You have a lot of topics to talk about, so I'm just going to pick the one that actually feels personal to me. The anti-Semitic attacks on a particular community. I have two people to blame, and these are politicians and the media. My apologies. I know you're part of the media is part of it.
Okay, that's fine. That's fine.
The media and the politicians is that there is a narrative that is being shared every time. This is not going to stop anytime soon. And the reason why is the kids that their parents are having issues. I don't want to use the word because I don't know if I'm correct, if I can use it on the radio, but the people that they're being executed or whichever case online, in the parent, the kids can see it. That hatred keeps going on those kids and they keep on doing this all over and all over again. They are being brainwashed that this is a fight for the religion, which is not. But they're doing things because they have seen the pain and the danger that their parents face. So this is a passed on issue that's going to be on the kids, and when they keep on going, they keep on doing the same thing. Now, why I said politicians and media, the way they change and they set the narrative, the politicians shouldn't choose a side. They should be open-minded and say, let's fix this issue rather than focusing. You mentioned earlier that 1% of the Jewish communities in Canada. However, the Jewish community is a very strong community. We all know that. You can't even say about things about different communities that doesn't really sound logical. So politicians also have their ways by coming out and just simply supporting one person and not supporting the other. We have it
but whether the Jewish community is a strong community or not is not really the case. We have schools being shot at, synagogues being firebombed, people of the Jewish faith being openly harassed in the streets. Should that be allowed to continue just because the Jews are a strong community in Canada?
100%. It shouldn't be allowed. That's why I said earlier that these people are being brainwashed. And you said you shared a video earlier where someone was openly professing hate language to someone. It shouldn't be a media thing. It should be an arresting thing. They should arrest him. I understand there's free speech, but we shouldn't condone that thing that put in on media. People listen to it. People get aggravated. People support it. No, we keep on condoning this by accepting it. That person who gave a open free speech, a open hate speech to someone, at some point, if he has a gun, he's going to use it. So why can't you just arrest that person? That's my point.
Well,
we keep on saying Canada is a lovely place and things like that, but believe me, you don't know what someone is thinking inside him. And because they do not have the opportunity to hold hands, that's why we're not like our brothers in the South. If these people have the hands, they will do what? So when they talk and they act, get them arrested. Don't wait for the action to start before you get them arrested.
So you think there should be a harder line? Right?
Exactly.
A harder line. Yeah, okay, fair enough. Thank you for your call. Yeah, I got to go, Jay, but I welcome your opinion, sir. Bye-bye. 1-833-668-2577. Talkback underway for another week on News Radio. Yep, open line, open topic today. Some topics already on the go. Is the government doing enough to prevent acts of anti-Semitism in Canada? What would you say to that? Provincial governments are moving to close down supervised drug consumption sites. The Smith government, the latest to do so, the only one in Calgary, but certainly the Ford government in Ontario take a hardline approach. Now, advocates are claiming this is going to make the addiction crisis even worse. Politicians are promising to spend more on drug treatment programs. Is it a good idea or a bad idea to close these places down? Food prices up again, the most in 3 years, according to the latest inflation report, up almost 5%. How is this changing what you're buying at the grocery store? The rising cost of food. 1-833-668-2577. Lots of lines available there for a Monday. Ivan is up next on Talkback. Hello, Ivan.
Hi, Rob. I would like to reflect on the Terror Act in Australia.
Yeah.
My thoughts are, and actually, I would like to ask you a question. Don't you think that active support of Hamas and Gaza is a hidden way to display their anti-Semitism?
Well, support for Hamas, yeah, sure. Supporting Hamas, glorifying terrorism is also a crime in this country.
It's actually, like what I've been thinking lately. So these people who are going on these meetings and displaying the Gaza flags and symbols, they are anti-Semites, and they are kind of hiding behind the noble, more like humane way of kind of supporting the lives in Gaza, but in the same time they are anti-Semites, and it's kind of hidden under this support of Gaza and people there. Okay. And it's just abhorrent what happened, and there's no place for these people here in Canada, I think. And if somebody commits crimes or actively radicalized against any community, any ethnic group, should be expelled, in my view. There's no place for them here.
Well, sure. How you do when you look at some of the crowds at some of the rallies and whatnot, it's not as though they're just people who arrived here last month or 6 months ago or in the last year or in the last 5 years. I mean, there are a lot of Canadian citizens there who sympathize with the Palestinian cause. And I appreciate that, but it's some of the behavior, some of the words, some of what you're hearing from the river to the sea, this sort of stuff. It's totally beyond, and it's been going on for 2+ years. It's been going on largely without anything being done about it, weekend after weekend after weekend in some of these neighborhoods.
Yeah, it's actually bad, but I think that the attention is being diverted by the mass media. That like we barely hear anything about the war in Sudan. We barely hear anything of the atrocities that are committed by the Muslims against the local people in Sudan, in the west part of Sudan, and it's not covered and doesn't receive as much attention, this much attention as the war in Gaza, and it kind of distorts the perception that so it creates the narrative that Jews are becoming a scapegoat for this for what's happening in Israel. Local Jews, I mean Jews here in Canada, and you know, I'm not Jewish myself. I'm Ukrainian, but I've been somebody I had this situation. Somebody suspected me of being Jewish, and I on the workplace on one of my previous jobs. And I know what anti-Semitism looks like. I felt it with my own skin, and it's nasty.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
Thank you, Ivan. Yep. No, thank you for your call. You know, I will just say this. I've been following this now, of course, for quite some time, ever since the events of October 7th and everything that has followed that. Israel's move into Gaza. Anti-Semitism never used to be this bad in Canada. I'm in my mid-50s now. I've never seen anti-Semitism like this in Canada, the way it has been in the last 2 years. Which is not to say there hasn't always been anti-Semitism in Canada. Of course there's a long history of it. The story, you can go back to the St. Louis that wasn't allowed to dock in Canada, carrying hundreds of Jewish refugees that were fleeing the Nazis in 1939. Prestigious country clubs that wouldn't let Jews become members, or prestigious firms across the country that wouldn't hire Jews. It's a long history of anti-Semitism in this country. But more recently, you know, say in the last few decades, in my own opinion, this sort of open Jew hatred has been more of a fringe thing. I mean, there have always been people who have expressed hatred for Jews, denied the Holocaust, but not like this. Not in the street like this, where it has now been part of daily life, the way it has been in some Canadian cities for the better part of 2 years. And I have talked with some Jewish people in my own social circle in the last 2 years, and they speak of being afraid. You know, they are genuinely afraid. And it just seems as though politicians are unwilling to address the seriousness of it. What do you think? 1-833-668-2577. Politicians, and I would say law enforcement, which I suspect comes right from the very top for some reason or another. 1-833-668-2577. Have your say on that or any other issue on Talkback today on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Yep, some topics in the mix there. The rising problem of anti-Semitism in Canada. Anti-Semitism, supervised drug consumption sites being closed by various provincial governments. Food prices up the most in 3 years. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio. I'm Rob Snow. It's Talkback. Abe is in Champion, Alberta. Hello, Abe.
Hi, how are you?
Very good, Abe. Thank you. What's on your mind?
A comment you made caused me to call in when you talked about things to be on the rise, anti-Semitism. I'll just give you a little comment up here so your listeners can listen. You know, our people, the Mennonites, came over the 1870s to Canada from where loosely where the Ukraine is now. And in the mid-50s, I remember my dad hitting his thumb with a hammer, and what first thing that came out of his mouth was the German, "Teflon da Jud," damn Jew. Now, that hit me, you know, even as a young guy like that just hit me like, where did that come from?
Right.
But, you know, I was taught at home that the Jews are the killers of Christ. I don't know. I think we got to clean up. Everybody in Canada's got to clean things up and at home teach their kids, and not to go against and believe all these stories about Jewish people. And
Agreed.
It's just they're like you and me. Like my wife's oldest brother once said, Abe, there's way more poor Jewish people than there's rich Jewish people. All these people in Manitoba that we're talking about, these darn Jews, they're rich and they own this and that. He said, that's just nonsense. He said, it's just nonsense. And I agree. This has just got to stop. I don't know what to do. All I can suggest is do it at home. Start there. Teach your kids to respect others. And just one other comment. People blame Islam. They blame that. Give an example. I did a paper at university on, and I think it was a sociology class, and root causes of the troubles in Ireland. It became apparent to me under the tutelage of a very wise teacher. You have to look further than religion. There's a lot of deep things, and it turns out it isn't religion that's, in my mind, that was the trouble of the troubles that caused them. And people need to keep that in mind, even when they look at all the Muslim countries and the Muslim believers around the world. It's a lot more basic and base human behavior than religion that causes this kind of stuff against Judaism. That's, if you want to ask me something, go ahead. Otherwise, that's all I was going to say.
Well, I would just say, I mean, everything that you've seen in this country with the rallies and the expressions of anti-Semitism, the violence, synagogues being firebombs, schools being shot at, businesses being vandalized, Jews being, harassed in the streets as they walk down the streets. Have you ever seen anything like this in all your years?
No. It's always been more hit.
And if that is the case, then shouldn't the government be stepping in to try and curtail this, or law enforcement? Should it not be taking a harder approach to this sort of thing?
Oh goodness, yes. I read a statistic and I think they're pretty credible news reporting, and doing research into the Palestinians in Gaza. And they were talking about the number of people that supported what Hamas was doing. Like, I was just astounded at the number. My God, somebody's got to step in there and help those people and straighten, and just help them get on with their lives in a peaceful way. I mean, this is that people should teach their kids to be terrorists, teach their kids to respect people like Hamas. That's a desperation on their part, I think. I don't think people are at core of that. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I just, I'm focused on what's happening here in this country, obviously, because of what's happened in Australia, because the two situations are very, very similar. And there have been accusations that the Australian government just let the situation fester and fester and fester. Now there are 15 people dead at a Hanukkah celebration. A lot of people are saying there's no reason that couldn't happen here, given what our government has allowed to go on for the last few years. I mean, I have talked to people, they're going to synagogue, there are security guards there, there are police cars in the parking lot. The worshipers have to go through metal detectors because of the threat of violence when they go to their houses of worship. It should not come to this in this country.
Yeah, you're right. And I don't know what the solution is, but I know that I look to the government to talk to people that know what they're talking about and put a stop to it. I don't know how to do it, but it's desperate. That's not right.
All right, Abe. Thank you. Thank you for your call. 1-833-668-2577. 3-4 lines available there. Wait won't be too long at all. Love to hear from you today. It's Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
At 1-833-668-2577. Lots of topics in the mix today. Is the government or law enforcement doing enough to prevent acts of anti-Semitism in Canada? Could more be done? What more could be done? Provincial governments moving to close down supervised drug consumption sites that advocates claim is only going to make the drug addiction crisis even worse in this country. But Politicians are promising they'll spend more money on drug treatment programs. Is it a good idea, a bad idea to close those places down? And food prices up again. How has that changed your shopping habits at the grocery store? What would we see in your kitchen? What would we see in your refrigerator? Food that you maybe didn't used to buy before, but you're buying now because food prices are, well, they're up almost 5% according to the latest report, and up the most in 3 years. Now, on the rise in anti-Semitism, imagine what it must be like to be Jewish. You live in a nice residential neighborhood where most of the people are also Jewish, and every Saturday there are pro-Palestinian protesters walking down your quiet residential street for no other reason than they know that a lot of Jewish people live there. And some of them are yelling the most vile things, calling people baby killers, talking about gas chambers. Just terrible, terrible stuff. And yet it's been allowed to happen for the last 2 years. Bathurst Street area in Toronto. Why are there protests happening there? There are no politicians making public policy who live there. If they're unhappy with the government, why aren't they protesting at a legislature, at the parliament buildings in Ottawa, or outside of an embassy? Why in a residential neighborhood? And why do the police just kind of stand by and allow that to happen? I mean, it's no secret what's been happening on some of our university campuses. Some of them have notorious reputations. York University has always had a reputation of being a place where you don't want to be a Jewish student. Concordia in Montreal, another one. TMU, Toronto Metropolitan University, school that used to be known as Ryerson. If you're Jewish, the word is out. Don't send your children to those universities. And yet it's been allowed to happen for 2 years. Almost no accountability. I mean, it happened just yesterday. Protesters outside various menorah lighting ceremonies just yesterday, despite what happened in Australia. 2 years of this. And now Jewish organizations are calling for help and demanding better protection and increased security. And the prime minister and some of his cabinet ministers are saying, well, what an awful tragedy this was in Australia. And it is. And they say there's no place for anti-Semitism in Canada. And yet very clearly, that's not true. Very clearly, there is a place for it. Or else it wouldn't be happening all the time. Jewish people make up 1% of the entire population of Canada, and yet according to the RCMP just last year, there were more than 3,200 hate crimes against Jewish Canadians reported to the police. 3,200. And those are just the ones reported to the police. 8 hate crimes against Jews in Canada reported to the police every single day. This is Talkback on News Radio. Welcome to hour number 2 of Talkback. I'm Rob Snow. We're open line, open topic all this week. We have been discussing some topics, whether our leadership should be doing, and I'm talking about law enforcement and political leadership, should really be doing more to prevent acts of anti-Semitism in this country. Provincial governments and harm reduction for drug policies. Closing down supervised consumption sites. We have one call on that in the first hour of the program. You know, what do you think about provincial governments making the decision to close supervised drug consumption sites? The advocates are saying these places save lives and that closing those places down, it only will make a bad situation worse. It will drive the addict into the shadows. It doesn't stop the drug abuse. It just makes using drugs more dangerous and more deadly, but it certainly hasn't convinced some premiers who have been taking action on closing them down. Premier Smith closing the only one down in Calgary, according to a report in the Calgary Herald. Doug Ford is closing about a dozen of them across Ontario. They were never really a thing in Nova Scotia, despite advocacy to open them. And knowing just how Tim Houston kind of sees eye to eye with Premier Ford, I suspect that Tim Houston in Nova Scotia wouldn't be in any hurry to open a supervised drug consumption site, say, in the city of Halifax. But feel free to have your say on those topics or any other topic. Food prices, according to the inflation report today, food prices up the most in 3 years, according to the latest inflation report. Let's get back to our phone lines. Sarah is in Calgary today. Hi, Sarah. Thanks for calling. What's on your mind today?
Hi, Rob. Thanks for having me on. I just wanted to first thank you for bringing up the topic of anti-Semitism after everything that's happened in Australia. I think that, one of the ways that we can start to address this is talking about it more and talking about it from these perspectives. So just wanted to say thank you for that, because I haven't felt supported as a Jewish woman in Calgary by my, city in a long time.
Really?
So, yeah,
really?
as I said,
if I could just stop there, why do you say that? Why do you say that?
So I think it comes down to, as kind of what you spoke about previously, the lack of feeling support and representation when we're faced with issues like the rallies that go on. A couple summers ago, we did a walk for Israel, and prior to, just around the neighborhood by one of our synagogues, to kind of raise awareness and represent after what had happened in October. And unfortunately, I can't specifically say who did this, but someone had found out the route that we were walking. And prior to us showing up there and walking the route around the neighborhoods, there was anti-Semitic and anti-Zionistic phrases that had been spray painted all over the public area. Mm-hmm. And this is like a public walkway going into, a nice community around Chinook Center. It's just completely already decimated with stuff that would be completely offensive and just anti-Semitic towards us. And I think kind of in that moment, I felt like I was standing in a room full of people screaming and nobody could hear me. And I still feel that way. I've lived in Calgary my whole life, and I was born and raised here as a Jewish woman and went to Jewish school here. And kind of as you previously said, I feel quite like nothing has been like this, as bad as it is now from an anti-Semitic person. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we've had our previous mayor choose not to show up to some of our previous celebrations or representations when we had our October 7th memorial.
I remember covering that. Mayor Gondek would not go to a menorah lighting ceremony. I remember that.
So that was pretty harsh. And as I said, it just feels like we're surrounded by people who, are willing to freely support terroristic organizations without any sort of education or insight, and without the realization if they were to march into Gaza with their support, they'd probably be shot on the spot. Just complete lack of understanding of what actually it's like there. Myself, obviously, having been to Israel multiple times. So, I just felt like I wanted to call in as a Jewish woman who's lived here my whole life and just hopefully, shout for help, because it feels like every time we try, it gets switched around, or we kind of get gaslit into this narrative that, terrorists were allowed to walk into Israel on October 7th. And just that was okay. And that's actually our fault somehow. So it's a weird place to live, but I would, all we want is just fair representation, fair support to feel safe in our city, to feel safe in our country. Everybody else here, I feel, gets that support. And I don't understand why we all have to scream on the streets for help and we don't get help.
Okay, Sarah. Thank you for your call. I appreciate your call today. Let's go to Lunenburg, Nova Scotia. Sam is in Lunenburg. Hi, Sam.
Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Very good, Sam. Thank you. What's on your mind?
Good. I just kind of wanted to respond to a couple of things that you and Ivan were talking about earlier. Just real quick, I hear a lot of people say, like, why do people protest what's going on in Gaza but not protest what's going on in, like, the humanitarian crisis in Sudan? I think a big part of that is probably just because Canadian and United States governments aren't actively funding the war efforts that are going on there, which, obviously the United States and Canada have both been providing military aid to Israel. So I think that, to me, I would see that as an explanation for why people aren't in the streets of Calgary or Halifax or wherever protesting those issues. And, like, secondly, these issues have been, this issue has been in the pop culture, I guess I'll call it, pretty heavily for the last 2 years.
Yeah.
And it's a pretty emotionally driven subject, obviously, on both sides.
Yeah.
And it becomes like hard for people to know what to even believe when it comes to an issue like this, because none of us, I mean, for the most part, we can only speak to what we see. So I'm not 100% certain that what you and Ivan were talking about earlier was regarding all, like implying that all pro-Palestine or all free Gaza protests are inherently anti-Semitic. Is that kind of what you guys were getting at earlier?
No, that's not what I was getting at. But I would say it is not right for pro-Palestinian protesters to go into a predominantly Jewish neighborhood only because Jews live there.
Yeah, I would agree. That's kind of, you're crossing some boundaries there for sure. I'm actually not familiar with that story. All I could speak to is, because I do, to be honest, hear a lot of people conflate all pro-Palestinian or people who are just protesting the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. I think conflating that, all of those people automatically with anti-Semites, I just don't think it does the cause any good. And
okay, but we've seen obvious examples, numerous dozens, hundreds of obvious examples of anti-Semitism in the streets of Canada's major city for the better part of 2 years. The Toronto police put out a statement saying, "Oh, we take the safety of the Jewish community seriously. If you see something, make sure you tell us." I mean, I couldn't help but shake my head because they see such things every day. They see things like that every single day. And I would remind you again, Jewish schools shot at, a girls' school in Toronto shot at 3 times. Firebombings of multiple synagogues. 3,200 hate crimes against Jews reported to the police. Do you really, can you really honestly say to me that our leadership in this country, and I'm talking about political leadership and law enforcement here, is doing enough to crack down on this scourge of anti-Semitism?
I'm going to say no. But again, I just wanted to, I mean, just based off of the statistics you just gave me, I'm going to say no. But I just wanted to make that comment that, you know, like, I can only
you believe. No, I understand what you're saying. You believe there are legitimate reasons for people to be in the streets to protest the actions of Israel, right?
Yes. Yes.
Israel. Israel.
Yes.
The government of Israel.
The government, and not just
led by Benjamin Netanyahu.
Benjamin Netanyahu's government.
Right?
Benjamin Netanyahu's far-right government. Okay.
That's one thing. That's one thing.
Yeah.
But to compromise the safety of Jewish Canadians in an effort to protest Benjamin Netanyahu's government in Israel is something completely different. And that's when you cross the line into anti-Semitism. That's my point, Sam. I think you get that. We'll be right back. I'm sorry I'm late. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
Herman is in Calgary today. Hi, Herman. Thanks for calling Talkback. What do you want to talk about?
How you doing, Rob?
Yeah, very good, Herman. Thank you. Go ahead.
Good. Hey, those protests that are going on there were, I don't know, I guess, pro-Palestinians. In those protests, just so I understand, what kind of people are they? Like, what I mean by that, like, do they represent a different religion? Would you say they're maybe like a Muslim majority of people that are?
Yeah, I would say it's a Muslim majority, but the coverage that I see on television, there are also people who are not Muslim there.
Yeah, I know. It's absolutely crazy. I know it.
Right.
So all of a sudden now, someone calls the police show up, and they round up all these Muslim people, start throwing them in vans. Do you think there will be another group of people that come out the very next day or within a couple hours and say, "See, Canada is Islamic phobic"? See. Do you think that would happen?
Maybe.
Okay. Then,
maybe.
Yeah. So I just wanted to tell you, in my opinion, to something that you talked about last week. That's why I think Quebec is about 50 years ahead of everybody else. That's why I don't think we need to get rid of religion in any shape or form in the public spaces. And I believe it would eliminate all these problems. You're not going to get rid of hate, racism, and stuff. But when it comes to religion, it's just one religion hating on another. It always has been for thousands of years. I just wonder, we're smarter than this. We just stop. But it's religion, all religion. Not agree with that.
Right. So you think one of the solutions, and this again has been, the road that the Quebec government has gone down, and has been going down this way for a very long time, is a secular society, right?
Yeah.
Like Quebec, a secular society.
I studied Quebec history in Quebec when I was living there in college, and one thing I am proud of Quebec. I don't live there anymore, but one thing it has gone from being the most religious province in Canada to the most secular in my lifetime, and I think I just want it's amazing. So
you think that's amazing? Okay, all right, okay, fair enough. Yeah, you've had your say, Herman. Thank you. And we're going to get back on track here and stop here. If you're on the line, please hang on the line, and we will fit you in on Talkback today. No doubt about that. 1-833-668-2577. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
To Stephanie in Calgary today on Talkback. Hi, Stephanie.
Hey, Rob. How's it going?
Yeah, very good, Stephanie.
Can you hear me?
What's on your mind?
Okay.
Yeah, I hear you just fine.
So with regards to what's going on in Canada with the anti-Semitism and things, and politicians apologizing for what they hear happening within cities around Canada, around the world, I think one approach that they could take, similar to when there's large biker rallies with larger factions that are known around the country, they have RCMP there. They have the city police there with the cameras taking photos. So why don't they start as a starting point with doing things like that, where that way they can go through. If they have pictures of individuals who have known criminal records, regardless of what it's for, if they're there at those protests, then at least they can approach them. They know where they likely live. They can approach and be like, hey, why were you here? So, especially depending on a person's criminal record who may have been released for whatever reason, maybe they served their time. But if it has to do with anti-Semitism especially, they can approach and be, hey, why were you here? You're not supposed to be within however many, feet, whatever.
Meters or whatever. Yeah,
exactly. So why aren't they starting with something like that? It's not a dangerous step for them to approach, not on a government level, not on a policing level. There's no reason there should be opposition to this because they're already doing it with certain factions when it comes to things like motorcycle groups and things like that. Big rallies have to be, advised in advance with the government, city government, whichever municipality, that they're going to be holding these protests. So it's a perfect opportunity, okay? Just so you guys are aware, this is what the process now is. So please advise those participants who are going to be coming publicly, this is what will be happening. So at least there's some sort of thing out there that may help to cause some sort of deterrent that may cause people to think twice if they have bad intentions of being there. You can't stop it from happening.
Yeah, but it would be really interesting to know just how many of these rallies that are happening every weekend that are clearly designed to a certain extent to not just protest against the government in Israel, but to harass and intimidate Jewish Canadians. It'd be interesting to know, how many of these rallies and these marches, how many of them actually have permits from the municipality? I don't know how it works in Calgary. In Ottawa, if you want to have a protest and a demonstration, you've usually got to get a permit from the municipality to actually have that. I doubt that, that you could just crack down on, well, you don't have a permit. Everybody has to disperse. Sorry about that.
And if they refuse to disperse,
I don't know if you've been watching it all, what's going on as these marches go through these residential Jewish neighborhoods in Toronto. It's basically glorified crowd control by the Toronto police. They don't do anything. They sit there on their bicycles like a bunch of donut eating mopes. Okay. I'm sorry to be that blunt, because I have a lot of respect for frontline police officers. I have a feeling that these are orders that have come down from the top.
Yeah. Well, or there's a fear of, for instance, if they're going through a neighborhood and they're defacing public property, those are not a peaceful protest. That is outright vandalism with an intention of bullying, manipulation, and potential for harm. So in those cases, I'm sorry, you have to send mass policing, and you do need to arrest people at that point. If they refuse to disperse or they're caught defacing public property, those people need to be picked up and charged accordingly. And the rest, if they refuse to disperse, well, then if it's not a registered, licensed, permitted march through a community, then they either leave or they get charged with some form of thing, whether it's mischief. I don't know what they can be, fined for, but there has to be some sort of response so that the public, regardless of your religion, actually starts to see this and take it as a serious thing. Because if nothing's happening, then, especially in these residential communities where there is defacing going on, then what? What is the deterrent?
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your opinion today, Stephanie. Be right back with more of your calls. There's some lines available there. It's been busy here in hour number 2 of Talkback. Love to hear from you today. 1-833-668-2577 here on News Radio. It sure is. Talkback here in the home stretch of the Monday edition, 1-833-668-2577. The rise in anti-Semitism in Canada, the future of supervised drug consumption sites, food inflation. I'm surprised there's not much interest in that. Maybe we've just all grown accustomed to food prices going up 5% every year, because we just saw an inflation report that showed food prices went up the most in 3 years. Pat is in Kitchener today. Hello, Pat. Hi, Pat.
Hi, Rob. I want to touch on the anti-Semitism issue.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that we're going through the season in the West, and I don't think it's really isolated to Canada. It's really a Western problem because there's a number of things that are kind of coalescing. First, I think that we somehow got to be a society that elevates like this victimhood to a virtue. The result, I think, is this empathy that is distorting our morals. And I'll give you like case in point. I'll give you some examples. We're a society that now tends to coddle violent criminals over victims. We're a society that tends to coddle squatters over the rights of homeowners. A society that tends to coddle illegal immigrants over its own citizens. And if you defend yourself excessively now, you have the possibility of getting charged. And so in a society where, your very speech has the possibility to put you in jail longer than people that actually commit rape, there's something off there. And it creates this political climate that politicians are really terrified, I think, of talking out against the victims because of these magic words being called some sort of phobia.
Right.
And if you if you actually consider what transpired in Australia, think about this: a father looking at his son and having a sense of responsibility to raise him right, at some point came across an ideology that guided him and his son into a murder-suicide of over 15 people.
Yeah.
How
mass
does
murder.
Mass murder, that's right. How does somebody get to a point where they think, a father and son think that that is a good idea? We have to get to a place in this country, not only in this country, in the West, where we're no longer afraid of our own shadows. We're very, again, we look at our past as a society and kind of like a little bit embarrassed about it, it seems. And I don't know, I don't know why. I don't know why, because if you read books on history, a book I'm recently reading is Answering Jihad by Nabil Qureshi. He's a former Muslim. And a thought-provoking book. I would encourage everybody to read it. But essentially, I think that one of the issues that we're up against here is by our own making. And again, it's being taught in universities. Police, I think, have the ability to stop a lot of this anti-Semitic crimes that are taking place, but choose not to enforce the laws because of they're terrified by these, offending these marginalized groups. And I think you're right. It's not necessarily the officers on the street. It goes all the way out top of the house.
Mm-hmm.
And so we really have to change our.
Yeah. Empathy. Too much empathy. Acquiescing to perceived victimhood, Pat?
Yes, empathy is good, but it can
empathy
be
is
suicidal.
good, sure. Yeah.
Empathy is
Thank
good.
you.
But
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Pat. Yeah, I understand. Yeah, your line of thinking there. Adam, up next. Adam, thank you for calling, Adam.
Hey, yeah, how are you?
Very good, Adam. Thanks.
Yeah, great. So, I want to touch on the anti-Semitism as well. In the span of the 24 hours of the first night of Hanukkah even, there was the 16 Jews murdered in Australia. 2 students murdered at Brown University by someone targeting a Jewish studies class. Hanukkah
I haven't seen that. Is that part of the reporting? I haven't seen that. I'm unclear about that. Okay.
That was as well something else that happened. And Hanukkah concert in Amsterdam violently disrupted by pro-jihadist, pro-Palestinian protests.
That I did see.
And this is all on the first night of Hanukkah. I think the rise of anti-Semitism in the West is shocking, but it's expected because there's always just this apology. There's no action that's actually taking place. I think one of the problems, and as some of your other people who have called in have mentioned, there's a problem in the West right now where people don't understand this level of extremism. It's hard for people to wrap their heads around that this can happen at their doorstep any day. And it just happens that the Jewish people are the first line of defense when it comes to, it not happening at the West or it not happening at a church. Tonight in Calgary, there's the annual menorah lighting where the mayor comes and you light the menorah. And guess what protest is scheduled for the exact same time outside of City Hall? Palestinian protest.
Of course.
Now, this is not about government. This is about intimidating. It's about radicalizing. And when they yell, globalize the Intifada across the West, that is a violent call. They're not hiding this through like cryptic messages. These are messages that they say out every day, which is calling to eradicate the West, to kill Jewish people.
Globalize the Intifada from the river to the sea. Right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
even it's caught on video and it's shared all over social media. And yet we hear from our politicians, well, there's no place for anti-Semitism in Canada. Well, clearly for the last 2 years, anti-Semitism in Canada has been given, I would suggest, my own opinion, a pretty wide berth. That's what I would say.
Absolutely. I think also it comes down to these words, right? Like we don't hold the people accountable. it's always, oh, we stand with the Jewish people, but we're not going to take any action to make them feel safe or to give them the support they deserve. And that's something that I think it's deeply worrisome that there's a group that has to be the front of all this bloodshed and murder in the West, or always the target. I know you mentioned earlier that there was 3,200 hate crimes called in. I think if that was all throughout Toronto, I didn't catch exactly what you
that's
said.
The RCMP annual report on hate crimes of
the annual
2024.
report.
Yeah.
And then you have, protests here in Calgary that I've been to, and you see Hamas flags, Palestinian Islamic Jihad flags, banned terrorist groups by the government of Canada that are flying freely. And you have the cops who are there taking pictures, but they don't have the power to do anything. And I've spoke with a few different cops, and they say the same thing. They say, we're here to take pictures, we gather information, but we don't have the power to make arrests that stick. And how do you feel safe walking down the street when these international protests are running rampant across the world and are always very violent and always very honestly, maybe it's too honest, and that's why people don't believe the words that they're saying and the dangers it has to specifically the Jewish community and the rise of anti-Semitism in this case, but also, the Christian community, also the other minorities that are affected by this on a daily basis. And I don't think people really understand what's knocking on the doorstep. And I think the empty promises need to stop and the action needs to start. And until we see the action taken by all our governments, this is just going to keep happening, being normalized.
All right. Adam, thank you for calling Talkback today. We have to stop here, though. Tight on time. This is News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
To Lori in Calgary today on Talkback. Hi, Lori.
Yes, good afternoon.
Yeah, hi, Lori. Yeah, you're on the air.
Yes, I'm just calling regarding to the rise of anti-Semitism, not only in Canada but worldwide. I'm a Jew in Calgary, and I think that people forget there's been many anti-Semitic, some quite dangerous events in Calgary. I will refer back to the 2014 pro-Palestinian protests regarding Protective Edge, where two opposing groups were separated in front of City Hall, and pro-Palestinian protesters crossed the road to the Israeli supporters and sent two families to hospital. What they were required to do, they did arrest two of them. They had to send a letter of apology, which, from what I read, was not very well written, but that was the end of that case. I've been to Israel several times. People need to understand there are 2.1 million Arab Israelis living well in Israel. And if you were to ask them if they wanted to live in Gaza or Ramallah, once they were done with their hysterical laughter, they would give you one answer, and that's not a chance. People, I think the issue is that they're so unfamiliar with the extremism. You could ask any of them, do you understand what the word infidel means? Because it's not just Jews. It's all of you.
Yeah.
And
I think, and I hate to interrupt, Lori, but I want to maybe introduce something else to your line of thinking here. It's not just about, the Arab or Palestinian Jewish divide or the Israeli-Palestinian divide, but it's also, a bunch of kids are going out to an event and it turns into an anti-Israel protest because that's the prevailing opinion in the school system. It's what's happening on the campuses of our major universities in this country, where there are sit-ins, that last for months and months and months, and you walk the corridors of a university campus like Concordia in Montreal, and
you're 100% correct, Rob.
It's just unbelievable what you would see there.
These are academics who have bought hook, line, and sinker about the poor wee Palestinians, and I will say Palestinians because there is no P sound in Arabic, so for them to refer to themselves as Palestinians is ludicrous. But this is coming from the top down. This is not only in campuses. This is in high schools. This is in elementary schools, because we don't have leadership. We have politicians. I look at the head of our government right now. I look at Melanie Joly, who had a nice visit a few years back with Mahmoud Abbas. I'm looking at Liberal MPs and I believe one NDP on their way to the West Bank. Well, it's only the West Bank if you're standing in Jordan. But these are the things that make it so easy for jihadists, because I don't know if it's just the naivete or it's deliberate, because Canada does not have a good standing as far as anti-Semitism goes, going back decades and decades and decades.
Oh, I mentioned that.
But what we have now are these people coming in. I have to tell you,
but for a while, it was very much a fringe thing.
Yes,
okay?
But it's no longer. And because they keep getting fed this, and it's an ancient Jew hatred that comes up and will always come up, because Jews are the easiest to blame. They don't like Jews fighting back, which is why this whole anti-Israel thing has come anyway, because we're not supposed to do that. I have to tell you, October 7th, I lost two 12-year-old twins, grandchildren of my best friend in Israel. It took them 6 weeks to identify by bone fragments. Liao, at Kibbutz Be'eri. They have no idea of the viciousness of these people, and I invite them to
interviewed
Gaza and protest there.
The family member, and I'm sorry, we're going to have to go. We're going to have to go. I interviewed them. It was the aunt of a Canadian-Israeli hostage held by Hamas for more than a year. They never did release her. They killed her. Yeah, terrible things. We have to go, though. This is Talkback on News Radio.
Have something on your mind you want everyone to know?
Call now.
Hello.
1-833-668-2577.
It's Talkback on Now You Know with Rob Snow.
There's some pretty heavy-duty stuff today on Talkback. I really appreciate all your calls, all your opinions today. Okay, Zakir in Calgary. Hi, Zakir.
Hey, Rob.
Zakir?
How you doing?
Yeah, very good, Zakir. Thank you for your call.
Thank you for picking my call. I do appreciate it a lot. Thank you very much. I have a few sentences about the anti-Semitism and what's going on all around the West, especially nowadays. There are a few points that I want to mention that, like, no matter where you're from, we have to be first human, have a sense of humanity and respect to each other. I'm not against the pro-Palestinian or Israel. No. If there is something wrong, we as a human, we should stand no matter what. So there are a lot of stuff going on in Israel right now. Thousands of Palestinians are died or killed during that war. So there are people that they're standing against that too. It's not.
But again, Zakir, it's one thing to stand against a country's government and the actions of a country's government. Okay, that's one thing. People have gone to protests like that in Canada forever and a day, to protest a government action that they don't like.
Well, yeah,
it's another thing to go after an identifiable group and harass and intimidate an identifiable group. That's completely different.
Yeah,
and
that's right.
That's the real problem in the country right now.
That's right. I'm absolutely against the protests or any relays like people going outside and block up people on the road or hospital and schools. That doesn't give you any result. That should be stopped, of course, but people who's, in the parliament or, let's say, representative from the communities, they have to work hard to, hear what's going on around. Like, everyone have a family around the world. Canada is a kind of diverse country that no matter, you have a family member around the world. Like, especially myself, I came here in 2011 from Afghanistan. And, the story of Afghanistan is all around the world. It's crazy what's going on there. But what I learned here is we have to love each other, respect, and keep human first.
It's a nice thought. It's a nice thought, and it should be the goal. It should be the goal. But for so many of our fellow Canadians of the Jewish faith, in all honesty, despite your best wishes, they're not feeling the love right now. Thank you for all of your calls today. New topic, more of your calls tomorrow on Talkback. The latest breaking news is next on News Radio.